sounds from noisy locations, a style suited to the complexities of the world the filmmakers wish to explore. Laced with black humor and irony, these films confront the gloomy, banal, and sordid aspects of Romanian life, revealing apathy and hypocrisy. Radu Jude, like most of his colleagues from the movement, is unabashedly political and is obsessed with history and Romanian national identity. He seems well versed in critical theory as well, critical theory and philosophy, weaving them together with pop cultural references as a discursive framework to his contemporary narratives. If you notice in the end, he presents, one title card with the name of major philosophers of our times, from Umberto Eco to Pierre Bourdieu, the entire big names. Stylistically, Jude is like a chameleon who moves from realism to expressionistic melodramas to mockumentaries, constantly shifting styles based on context and themes. Sometimes he brings together contradictory impulses, deploying a mishmash of styles within the same film. For example, his 2018 films, I Do Not Care If We Go Down in History as Barbarians, brings together dramatized scenes, historical reenactments, archival footage, photomontages in a complex self-reflexive critique of Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism by Romanian nationalists. Loony Porn continues with Jude's preoccupation with national identity, re-examining it in the troubling backdrop of COVID-19 pandemic and how a global medical crisis has brought disturbing historical forces to the surface. The film centers around an awkward but explicit sex video filmed by seemingly unadventurous, monogamous, heterosexual couple in the privacy of their bedrooms. One can surmise that the young middle-class couple is seeking an escape from the boredom of lockdown and isolation. The video is explicit and filmed with a cell phone camera, an example of the so-called quote-unquote homemade porn, a hardcore version of the softer, voyeuristic videos which now crowd YouTube. I was doing a project on film censorship where a filmmaker from my native part of India, Bengal, he said, there's so much of hullabaloo about film censorship in India, but look at, YouTube, where actually couples go and make, the soft porn videos, and they are made in all Indian languages now. And I then checked, the YouTube is actually quite full of them. I mean, they're not so explicit as the one this film has. Now, there's nothing in this narrative to suggest that the video was created by the couple in the film with a commercial interest in mind. As emphasized by Emilia, it was a private erotic media produced by two consenting adults for self-consumption. Unfortunately, the video leaks out and gets uploaded to adult sites on the internet, triggering moral outrage and eventual public humiliation. The bare narrative of a woman teacher's humiliation hides a complex stylistic bricolage of visual styles, discourses, and themes reminiscent of I Do Not Care If We Go Down in History as Barbarians. And that is why I think both these two films, 2018 and 2021, they reflect a slightly different style than we see in aesthetically, if not thematically, in the templated Romanian New Wave films. Apart from the sex video, which begins the film, Loony Porn has three sections constructed in separate and distinctive styles. The first section, interestingly, is preceded by an intertitle from the Mahabharata, which says, "No one understands that the world is sinking on the ocean of time that is so deep and infested with those crocodiles called decrepitude and death." This is from Mahabharata Shanti Parva, chapter 23. Shanti Parva, as you may know, is after the Kurukshetra war is over and Yudhishthira is kind of crowned as the king. So we have peace, but we also have a lot of philosophizing about ethics, spirituality, reflections on what is right and wrong, that preceded the Great War of that preceded this phase with the Great War and the conflict between the cousins. I don't want to read too much into the filmmaker's use of these intertitles, because he throws these things at you all the time. The main section, the first section is called One Way Street. It shows Emilia walking around Bucharest in the immediate aftermath of the leaked video. It is a cityscape that has been scarred by COVID. People are angry and impatient, even hostile, and highly abusive to their fellow citizens at times. Emilia is both a victim and a witness to scenes of rage spilling out into the street. She's anxious and worried because of the ramifications of the sex tape. She tries to buy an anti-anxiety drug from a pharmacy where elderly citizens quibble about the ethics of organ transplant, or how churchgoers were spared of COVID-19 despite sharing a spoon at the Eucharist. And we in India know, this kind of narratives abound about, how COVID, you can't get COVID in a temple. I mean, we've all come across it. Amidst the anxious exchanges, the camera scans the decrepitude of post-socialist Romania. It is chaotic, noisy, polluted, garish billboards, crumbling architecture, and angry citizens remind us of Hollywood zombie movies. It is a city where noise overpowers meaningful communication, civic decency is undermined by obscene outbursts by men and women. In this section, Jude deploys Pla sequence, a one-shot sequence associated with Romanian New Wave, and the Romanian filmmakers love it. But he deviates from the classical aesthetic of Pla sequence by shifting the focus back and forth between people and things. It's not always on people, shifting between people and things as if to give them equal weight. The camera dwells on buildings, roads, crowds, vehicles, even after Emilia has entered or exited the frame, making viewers acutely aware of the city, making us spatially aware, as well as making us aware of the passage of time. So, this kind of moving between back and forth between people and things make us very strongly aware of temporality. In the second section, this ends the first section. The second section, titled Small Dictionary of Anecdotes, Signs and Miracles, is Brechtian in essence, disrupting the diegesis with a brash, discursive intervention. The film moves away from Emilia's crisis into an expository mode. The topics of this exposition are history, society, cinema, sex, fascism, phallocentrism of language and speech. In this section, Jure cobbles up a montage of archival footage, still images, lurid visual parodies, and superimposed explanatory texts telling us about the issues which are at the root of Emilia's predicament. So it's like, a section which tries to explain, look, this is what has caused, this crisis that this woman is facing. The references sometimes intertextual, largely alluding to Romanian history, sexual politics, and gender. Perhaps the most illuminating part in this segment is where Jude invokes the myth of Medusa and likens the cinema screen to the polished shield in which Perseus witnessed a dangerous monster. Society is like, he quotes, an unfathomable horror, which, like the face of Medusa, cannot be gazed at directly. It is through the cinema screen, Jude observes, one can witness the horror, which is otherwise inaccessible to us. So cinema gives us access to the horror, which, if we look at it directly, we will be destroyed. The final section, interestingly, is titled Practices and Innuendos, sitcom. It brings us back again to Emilia's story, because we moved away in the central section from Emilia's story. It is the most dramatic, polemical, and perhaps the most bizarre part of the film. It is made up of a 42-minute scene in which Emilia is put to trial by a group of near hysterical parents who mount an indecent no-holds-barred attack on Emilia. The parents' main grievance is that Emilia has lost her moral right to continue as a teacher in the school. Parents also hold her responsible for ruining the innocence of the middle school students, ignoring Emilia's defense that children in the first place should not have access to such videos. There is also a cynical, albeit a single voice among the parents who keep on questioning the premises of the witch hunt. He keeps intervening with philosophical nuggets from eminent 20th century thinkers. The questions that arise: is this video public or private? If there is no commercial intent, is it still pornography? Are the children completely asexual beings? Does watching nudity or sexual act spoil juvenile innocence? I am a father of a teenage daughter, and I had a very frank talk with her. I think she's 16 by the time they turned 11 or 12. She says that 80% of her friends were exposed to hardcore pornography. These are the times we live in India, in a conservative country, in a conservative society. So these are the questions that the film poses, and these are very relevant questions. These are also these questions, troubling questions, are drowned by a vulgar crescendo of allegations. The film closes with 3 alternative ends, as if to suggest that this absurd drama cannot have a concrete closure. In the first of the three conclusions, the parents vote to retain Emilia in the job. In the second, they vote to expel her. And in the third, Emilia turns into a vengeful superhero who torments her tormentors with a massive dildo. Beneath the apparent madness and cluttered surface of Looney Porn are some brilliant performances from an ensemble cast, especially in the final section set in the school. The cast manages to portray middle-class outrage of the parents with fascinating energy and accuracy. We see lascivious men who attack a woman with cuss words and yet are worried about their daughter's innocence. Women who degrade other women while complaining about mansplaining. The devout who believe that they are protected by COVID by the will of God. They represent people who are in every society. The actors, Katia Pescariu, Alexandru Potasian, Andy Vasluianu are veterans from films by New Wave Masters. Irene, please forgive my pronunciation. Are veterans from film from New Wave Masters, Christian Mungiu and Christian Nemuscu. They bring to the film the sharp improvisational acting associated with long take filming. Long take filming requires a certain kind of training, and Romanian cinema, actually, I think Irene will be able to confirm during the discussion, this kind of improvisational acting required of this long plot sequences. Romanian's new wave in the recent past also has become somewhat repetitive, with younger directors emulating the work of the bigger names such as Cristi Piu or Christian Mungiu. Radu Jude avoids the trap by exploiting as well as critiquing the dominant style of the Romanian new wave. In doing so, he has managed to reaffirm his position as a filmmaker who continues to question the established canons of cinema, and by bagging the Golden Bear at the Berlin Film Festival in 2021, Looney Porn has ensured that Romanian cinema remains as a force to contend with in the art cinema circuit. So this is how I'll end my presentation. Of course, there are a lot more things possibly to discuss. I thought this kind of, I've tried to frame it in a certain way to begin the discussion, and I'll invite responses. I mean, the moderator will invite more responses. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Indranil, for bringing alive the film once again to us through your discussion. I watched it a week ago, and somehow some of the details had escaped me, but thanks very much for pointing them out. Anyone who's ready to respond to the film or to respond to Indranil's presentation, most welcome. Irina, would you like to respond to the film?
I don't mind at all being critiqued.
Oh, I love the presentation in Indranil.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for it. I wonder in what way you feel that this is a critique of the Romanian New Wave. I mean, in general, I think of Jude as someone who has intervened in the Romanian New Wave by bringing in, not so much in this movie, but in other movies, sort of a more traditional historical narratives. For example, in
Aferim, yeah.
For example, where he presents in this sort of Western style a very striking long episode of Romanian history, which has been very much buried and which persists in Romanian life to this day as persistent racism against the Roma. But he uncovers the history of that. So in this movie, this middle section, the small dictionary of anecdotes, I think that is a very striking piece.
Yes.
which sort of disrupts the narrative in a way. And it sort of brings in a kind of, to me, it seemed that he's bringing in all the backstory of, you know, why the way the way common notions of sexuality, common notions of what's proper, are presented mostly to Romanian audiences or Romanian public, the people that are going to be trying Emilia in part 3, but also more broadly to in the world of middle class notions of what's proper, right? But I mean, there are some, for example, Eminescu is one of the
Eminescu, the author, who writes erotic poem,
He appears on a banknote, right? Because
he
he's
appears
a
on the
national
banknote.
poet.
Yeah.
But he appears on a banknote, which at the same time tells you that he's a big enough figure to be on a banknote, but at the same time he's diminished because it's a banknote that you buy things with, right? So it's commercialized. And then during the trial, she says, well, even Eminescu was someone who produced erotic poetry, and she declaims
Quotes it, yeah.
Right, and then people say to her, well, maybe you made up that verse, right? So, I mean, so it becomes, everything is contended. But I love that middle section, which must be the most problematic for viewers. It's like, what is this? What is this stuff? Yeah. But you talked about, so yeah, back to my question. How do you feel that he's critiquing the new wave?
You know, my feeling, and I could be wrong, is the new wave has now kind of has a template. You know, when one goes to watch a Romanian new wave films, one kind of knows that this is what we are going to watch. And film after film has followed the same style. I'm not saying that films are bad or mediocre. They're great films, but the style is somewhat repetitive. And I think what makes Jude important is he's aware of this. And he's trying to kind of, you know, he's using that, mind you, in the first section. There are these long takes and the plan sequences, but he uses them slightly differently. Like when she reaches the apartment of the headmistress, where she has this talk, and there are these 2 men or 3 men who could be her family members, her son or her husband. So if you look at the shot, it's a very complex staging, and it is like how a long take is staged by most of the Romanian filmmakers. But later on, as she moves into the city, the camera is there. The takes are still extended. They're very long takes, but you know, people and buildings become equally important. You know, there are sometimes the camera moving and dwelling into people's or crowds or things. So, and the middle section, which again is, I think, in terms of, again, style is a departure from the classical Romanian new wave, if I may use that word. You know, I watched Graduation and, you know, all the recent ones, and more or less same style. It's fascinating. You know, as filmmakers, we're fascinating by the kind of skill they have to film like that, the actors that they use, who can perform like that in a single take. So, but Jude has kind of used it as well as broken it. That was the argument that I was trying to. And so it's a very self-reflexive use of this style. You know.
Yeah.
So not so much thematically. Thematically, the preoccupation is the same as you know. He speaks about the same hypocrisies of middle class that you see. You know, bureaucracy. You don't have state bureaucracy like in Dr. Lazarescu. You have the school bureaucracy, which in essence kind of same. You know, or the way the pilot and the military man, the two fathers among the parents, they behave. It reminds me of all the bureaucrats you've seen in the early Romanian New Wave films, because the filmmakers are constantly poking fun at the bureaucracy. So those are,
Yeah.
there are this, what I've found fascinating are these intersections as well as stylistic departures.
Right. Right. I don't want to monopolize, but I loved what you said about the people and things in this first long section of the film. And of course, the things, the buildings in this very long walk that she takes to the city. You know, some of the buildings that she's looking at are beautiful old buildings, which are being allowed to get more and more decrepit in order to be torn down.
Yes.
So, you know, so to deprive the old owners, who are trying to repossess their buildings from getting them, and so that new office buildings can be built. I mean,
It
there's
can be
like a
built.
whole
Yes, yes, yes.
legal
Thank you. That's a great, great information.
yes. I mean,
This is
it was it's a film that is so rich in background detail that
true, true.
I don't know exactly, you know, it can be viewed on many levels.
Yeah, and I suppose which non-Romanian person will miss is the locations which are shown. There is, if I'm not mistaken, there
Yes,
is an old film theater.
yes,
The camera tilts up, where you have this ice cream cones, the colored ice cream cones, and
yes,
the camera tilts up, and you see that old movie theater. So it's also,
yes,
it is signposting certain kind of geographical locations to evoke
absolutely,
a sense of memory, which
absolutely,
possibly, like all
absolutely.
majors, especially in post-colonial cities, we have the same problem. Old buildings are allowed to get ruined so that they can be taken over by big capital and turned into malls and
Yes,
multiplexes.
right.
So of course, yes, those, and there are a lot of hidden signs which probably non-Romanian will not be able to read. I'm aware of that, and I don't think we could identify most of them.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very local references. What I found very interesting is also, because I'm a sound scholar, the soundtrack,
Mm-hmm.
where that normal communication requires an effort, because the sound of the ambient sound, like in all cities, noisy cities, is so strong
Mm-hmm.
that she has to go inside a shop to talk. you
Yeah,
know so which I found was very interesting, and that constant noise is a issue in that first
right.
section in the city.
Absolutely.
She's fighting noise, she's fighting angry people. Then there is this
Mm-hmm.
guy who's dressed like a sailor, who makes a obscene remark at her, who follows her, a
Yes,
old man in a
yes,
sailor's dress. So
right.
there's this very curious scenes. There is also this scene that is why I think that scene is also anchored in absurdity of a certain kind. He has this obsession with showing this very high SUVs, which have, the wheels are very big, but the car is very small. So much so that it's basically for village terrains. Those SUVs, four-wheel SUVs are meant for village terrain. Twice we see those SUVs, and once from the SUV we see a very short man climbing down from that SUV. That's, and then after that she emerges from behind that vehicle.
Mhm.
But then again, he's the first thing that strikes you, wow, what is that vehicle doing in that city? I mean, it's meant to be in a village area, if at all. And why
Mhm.
is the short man coming down? If he's so short, why he's using such a high vehicle? So these are things he cleverly kind of puts across.
There is another scene during this first part in which she talks to the driver of a parked car, and she tells him,
Hmm.
"You are parked on the sidewalk. Why are you on the sidewalk? Get off the sidewalk. And he responds to her very abusively. I mean, at first it's like, oh, I'm just here for a short time. And then she says, well, you can wait on the street, but not on the sidewalk. This is a huge problem. I mean, my Romanian friends on Facebook, they are constantly posting about how the cars are just taking over all the sidewalks. There's no room for people to just walk on the sidewalks. And then he begins to address her as a whore. And then he says, and you don't even have a car. You are a terrible, poor person. And so you have this whole social conflict that is in that little conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I found that interesting, that whole notion of vulgarity, you know, that because her main issue, and which is why she is kind of has to face the kangaroo court, is the fact that she had been vulgar. But then again, the filmmaker constantly show you the vulgarity that is there embedded in the society. You know, the vulgarity of consumerism, of capitalism, the fact that you can insult a person, you know, about their economic position, or you know, simple road rage turning into a complete nasty exchange between citizens. So the vulgarity is all there, you know? And it's whereas, you know, the vulgarity that is she is alleged, you know, alleged to have committed, you know, is not vulgar. I mean, that is what I think is finally wanting to say. So it's very ironical that way.
Right.
There's this, you know, scenes where this old lady comes and says something vulgar on camera. Whether was it a old lady randomly coming and talking to the camera crew, or was she an actor who's made to say these lines? If I understand Romanian New Wave, I think she's an actor made to say these lines, but he keeps that ambiguity, you know. Is it a kind of a documentary kind of a thing picked up by the camera? Do you remember this? There is this, when she's in the market, suddenly an old lady comes in front of the camera and says something obscene and goes away. You might have missed that. I read it as, I don't know.
I'm forgetting. Is it the open air market or the mall?
In the open air market. In the open air market. Yeah.
I'm not remembering.
I think a mall.
It's not in the mall. I think it's in the open air market earlier in the scene.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm done talking for a while.
No, that's fine. Irina, go ahead, please. I was just trying to fill in the gap. Yeah, please go ahead.
So another thing that struck me was the way that Jude is kind of using similar character in this movie and in I Don't Care If We Were Barbarians. Going to history as barbarians.
Yes.
So the character of Emilia, is very similar to the character, the main character of the director, producer. Would you agree?
I completely agree. Yeah. These films have a lot of similarity, I think.
What?
I feel the two films have a lot of similarity, you know, in certain ways.
And so at the end also, during the third part, she is accused of not having made just one major error with this sex tape, but also other errors, such as teaching the students about the Holocaust. And and then she says, well, yes, I did teach them about the Holocaust. And then there was this story from Isaac Babel, which is exactly some of the material from this previous
The
movie.
Barbarians, yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
And also Hannah Arendt,
Hannah Arendt, yeah.
up. And so it's kind of a replaying of this previous movie, which I just loved, the way these movies then kind of meld into each other.
Dovetail into each other, right?
Yeah,
There's
it's
also, I was
almost
reminded of, sorry, please carry on.
it's almost as if you could, these two people are almost one and the same, or the same type.
Same type.
Right?
Yes.
They both
Really.
have sex lives and they both have political opinions.
Opinions, yeah.
Yeah.
True. And very strong characters, and I was also reminded, I mean, there is this constant reference to anti-Semitism in Romania, and I think also to Europe in general, reference to Hannah Arendt, the concept of banal, and Hannah Arendt's famous formulation of the banality of evil, which is what you feel when you watch this film, because you witness a kind of evil, a banal evil, in the parents, the way they kind of jump on her, and they're kind of trying to find a villain. They have to find someone to, a witch to be burnt at the stake. So I was also reminded of the banality of evil, Hannah Arendt's formulation.
Yeah, anyone else would like to come in at this point? Nipa, would you like to come in?
I think for those of us who who teach film and are immersed in film studies, that second section is absolutely stunning. It's very, very Godardian, actually. It reminded me of Godard, but much more accessible and enticing in some way. And as Indranil said, there's a sort of rage there that resonates even in other parts of the world, because it's a rage against appearances and of conformity and of kind of middle class morality, basically. And it's also, you mentioned the dark humor or the black humor, and that's certainly what the middle section does. But I was also very interested in the many when she's walking through the city and the long takes and the billboards, just the billboards by themselves. Right. I wonder if one could just think about the billboards taken together as another kind of commentary that is running across the film. In other words, is he using the signage and the words that already exist in the city to communicate certain other ideas? I mean, of course, I watched this once, and that would take some more careful watching to see exactly what kinds of signs, and some of them are not translated for us. But given the kind of filmmaker he is, it seems to me that when he tilts the camera or moves it away to show us some words on a billboard or on a wall, it isn't without a reason. So absolutely. I wondered if you noticed some of the signs as another form of commentary, just like in that middle section. It's sort of like, I would call it, I was watching it and I was thinking, wow, this is found commentary, like found footage. He's got the middle section where he's done it, and then he's got found for commentary that he's cobbling together.
I think you were very right. Both the middle section is a kind of a semiotic ordering of things, which is more, in the face, in the sense that it is more explicit, whereas there are semiotic ordering of things in the first scene, I pointed out to some of, these shots of people and, vehicles that he's referring to, but an architecture, and Irene referred to, the decrepitude of the architecture is also a point towards the fact that, these are kept like that so that they can be taken over. So in the same way, I think the billboards definitely, I remember the billboard of a Mortal Kombat Academy in the beginning, which is in English. Uh, as you said, I think everything has a meaning here. Definitely the billboards would be meaning something, with access to the language or to the local references, one might be able to. But we do get a sense that those signs have a meaning, and they uh, kind of connect with the later section of the film.
Anyone else would like to come in now?
I agree with you, Nipa, about the signage, and there are a lot of exchange shops, like currency exchange shops that she passes. Also the video game store that she walks into to avoid the noise, that's called Manhattan. I don't know if you caught that. And it's basically a very kitsch commercial scene that I don't remember all the names, but I agree with you. I would love to watch it again and just really peel my eyes on those signs. A lot of them, I think, are going to be names in English, or, of some sort of something you could see on 42nd Street, probably, in Manhattan. But there are also other kinds of kitsch, sort of national kitsch. So there is 1918, which is the year that Romania was unified. So that was recently commemorated, 100 years from that moment. That was a big year of commemoration. So that appears on a big billboard. I would have to watch again, but that one definitely was there. So there is, historical kitsch, and then there is commercial kitsch at the same time.
Yeah, anyone
Thank
else?
you.
Yeah, Indranil, you want to respond?
No,
now?
I just wanted to thank Irene for that, insight. It's very useful. I didn't want to talk about Godar, but the way Professor Nipa Majumdar mentioned, it's very Godardian, that section, but more playful, more playful, and as she said, as she described it, more accessible. Godar is far more complex and more, you have to really fathom what he's talking about. Whereas here it is more playful and more easy to understand, more easy to relate to that central section of that, if you call it a montage. Basically, that's what I wanted to add. It's angry and playful. That's what struck me about the film. Hello?
Yeah.
I just wanted to see if I'm there.
Yeah.
Because my
Yes.
internet connection was acting up.
So if I can mention one thing, I'm sure that people might have noticed it, but in the middle section, the family there was a family part of the dictionary, and the picture of that, the image was the back of a boy who had been beaten very badly. So he's really commenting, you know, these parents who are so concerned with the sex scene, why are they not concerned with
About
violence, family violence, you know, or I don't know how this, I watched it without subtitles. I don't know how this was translated, but the girl on page 5 was, you know, pictures of women in pornographic literature, right? And this would be, you know, the girl on page 5 would be the way men would refer to pictures like that, right? So they wouldn't have to say
just like that, right?
right. So there are a lot of that's where the playfulness and the anger comes in, right? It's right there in these images,
Yes.
paired with these words, these innocent words.
I wanted to ask you about, there is this archival footage of Orthodox Christian priest and a group of nuns who are singing a song which seems to be a pro-fascist song, you know, from the
Yes.
lyrics. So is it?
How did you know?
No, the words said, you know, the subtitle said it, the words were very pro-fascist. It kind of
Yes.
glorifies
Yes.
nationalism, but a kind of a very strong fascist kind of nationalism.
Right.
So,
Excellent
do you have any
question.
idea which
Point.
period this footage is from?
Well, that's a very big question, but basically in the 1930s and 40s, the Orthodox Church, which is the main church in Romania, was pro-fascist.
I see.
Many priests were really pro-Iron Guard, which was the main fascist organization, and then to this day they are. I mean, it's a complicated story, really. But then the fascists were persecuted during the communist era, and now the Orthodox Church and some right-wing organizations are calling for making these people who are persecuted into saints.
Saints, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
That's
there
very
is a
interesting.
arch of continuity there.
And also kind of juxtaposition of two kinds of totalitarianism. You know, the fascist totalitarianism, you know, the
Yes.
fascism and then communist
Yes.
totalitarianism, which Romania witnessed.
Well, and there
and
was
flows of history.
a lot of winking during the communist period as well. I mean, the communists actually used blackmail to bring in some of these fascists into the communist party. And so it's a very complex story, but yes. And of course, Ceausescu himself appears several times in the film and parades under the Ceausescu regime.
I thought that scene where, you know, the tourist guide shows Ceausescu's palace is so fascinating. You know, there is this, there are these groups of Chinese tourists whom you actually see everywhere in Europe. And she's explaining, and then, you know, this one particular tourist trying to interrupt, and, you know, she shuts him down. That was very interestingly staged in front of Ceausescu's palace, because I still remember it was very much in the news in those days when the palace was stormed by people. You know, so all those memories. I mean, I was still very young, but all those memories came of, you know, the Romanian movement.
Yes. Yeah, that palace is still there. It's huge. Of course, it's like as big as the Pentagon. Um, it's so big that it now houses the Romanian parliament, and the Contemporary Art Museum and a few other things. And there's still room. It's huge, huge, huge. And I also think that the story she told about the architect dying, I think that was bullshit.
Yeah, possible. I
Yeah.
think that's one of the, because he also calls the film a sick joke. So
Mhm.
no, it's a vulgar film about vulgarity. I mean, the
Yes.
vulgarity being quotes on both accounts. So
Uh-huh.
he also does his jokes in between. So I kind of I don't know whether it's right, but I think you have a point there of this whole thing about the architect being a story is just pulling a fast one on us, just like a joke.
Uh, I was Indranil. When I began watching the film. Of course, it begins with the pornographic content. We are kind of drawn into the video clip allegedly uploaded and then downloaded and circulated and recirculated and so on. So, in a way, I think the last part of the film is also putting us and our own assumptions in some ways on trial. So it does. I don't know if it allows us easily to extricate ourselves. In some ways, the various views that are expressed by the parents are also views that implicate us and our own sense of relation to what we have just witnessed. Also, there's so little that is explained in the first and second parts of the film. So the film kind of allows us to conjecture, form opinions, wonder, who this character is, what is happening, and there are just stray bits of information that is given. Most of which we only understand how useful they are in constructing the narrative much later, because there's so much else happening in the film. We don't know what is of narrative value and what is simply there, giving us, as Irina and you rightly said, the backstories, for all this. So in that sense, I also thought that probably this first sequence, which in some ways shocks us, implicates us, even before we realize what is happening. I mean, I just switched on the movie, and before I could sit, in my place to watch the film, there was this thing unfolding. So I was wondering if that is also one of the functions of that bit of the video which we get to see in the beginning of the film. Thank you, Indranil. Yeah.
Thanks. Do you want me to comment on it? I think it's a very good point, Nikhila. It's great that you brought it up. Our first reaction to the beginning section of the sex tape. I mean, however, liberal you are, it's going to shake you a bit, because it's the whole thing is structured, framed, presented, represented like pornography. It's not, for example, in FTII, we had a bit of an outrage by some non-teaching staff when Oshima's The Realm of the Senses was screened because it had a lot of explicit sex, but it was, a sex scene shot by a director, one of the greatest artistic directors that we've seen, in very tasteful ways, in a certain kind of staging and all that. Here we are thrown into a explicit sex scene which is shot like pornography. it's film like pornography, and they actually have unsimulated sex, and which there's orgasm happening in real time. So all these things are meant to shock you. Unless you are shocked to a certain extent or slightly taken aback, if not shocked is a strong word maybe, you can't have the kind of reaction that follows later on, where you are also implicated, because you're also implicated, because it's the director is also the director also guesses that we, however liberal we are, it actually does address some of our own issues about what should be public, what should be private, because it's all the time playing in our mind. Okay, this couple, even if what they're indulging in, did they really need to film it? If they really need to film it, did they really need to film it the way it was filmed? So all these kind of questions that might come to your mind is done with a purpose, and unless it is done like that, it probably won't evoke the shock value that and bring out all the discursive uh, elements that the filmmaker wants you to process. So I think you pointed out a very interesting part about that we are implicated very much.
Geeta wants to come in. Geeta, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Nikhila. Thank you, Indranil, for your presentation, and Irina, Nipa, Nikhila, all of you for your intervention. I thought the way in which each part of the film ends was also very interesting and significant.
Yes.
With this freeze on a building which has a series of nude statues. And this reminded me of how every time, even in India, there is noise about obscenity in films or that kind. There is the argument that what are they talking? They just have to see the statues in Khajuraho. So that is what came to my mind when I saw this particular scene. And part one actually ends with that, and with the camera freezing on these statues. And in part two, there was one very interesting image, a photograph, and which I think is very ironic, because I'm not too sure of the historical context. It's a black and white photograph of white men, fondling the private parts and the breasts of Aboriginal women. So I think that is ironic because this particular photograph clearly shows the non-consensual nature of that touch, and that seems to be there, in as part of that second part of the movie, which with all its signs there, and something like that. And in real life, there is so much of noise about consensual sex. And the same part ends with the line, "Human life must be seen as tragical and comical." That is how it was subtitled. So that's again almost as if the filmmaker is kind of asking us to think about life in this particular manner as a mix of both tragedy and comedy. And there is, of course, ample comedy even within that part. Part two, that woman being chased by this person dressed in the garb of a bull, and she ends up by saying, "I'd rather have a calf than a heart attack." And so there is a lot of humor in that. And part three, of course, ends with Emmy turning into a Wonder Woman kind of figure, and forcing fellatio on those parents in the nest. So I think the way he has, first of all, the structure, the triptych structure is very interesting. and the way in which each part ends is also very significant. That's all.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Geeta. Yeah,
Geeta.
Indranil,
Yeah, please,
please.
Nikila, carry
Yeah,
on.
please go ahead. No, I was just
No,
inviting you.
I was thinking, yes, I mean, colonialism, how it treats the way colonial subjects were treated, how they were objectified, turned into almost like an animal. So, so it, the way, I mean, there is so much in the film in the sense of, it is commenting on the entire legacy of sexuality in the West, that how uh, the black woman versus white woman, how black woman sexuality becomes something that, can be uh, kind of, easily objectified. So, and the legacy that continues in the part of the Western world of, treating the colonial subject, or attitude towards colored people, or attitude towards races, brown or dark races, and how it kind of connects with contemporary ideas of sexuality. So there's so many strands that he posits in front of us. So I think, yes, what you said was very interesting about this connection, that black and white image of the white man with the African woman, Aboriginal woman.
Yeah, anyone else would like to respond? Jayanto, would you like to respond?
Yeah, hello.
Arunya, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Arun.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I have a couple of comments and I have noted it down as well. So it's kind of erratic. So I'll go from one to the next. So I absolutely love the film for starters. I didn't, first of all, the title was very interesting and I was right away pulled in. And the opening scene, like what you were discussing about the kind of shock value of the unsimulated sex scenes and all that, right in your face as soon as you start it without giving any time for settling down or anything. That was very interesting. And I personally didn't find it very scandalous or controversial, like because it might be because of the content that I've been kind of taking in. So that was kind of normal for me. See, we are living in the age of high quality internet pornography, and we are living in the age of Gaspar Noé. So, so this is not really surprising. And, the almost, this kind of demarcation between pornography and cinema has been almost completely erased.
Can I just interrupt you a little, Arun?
Yeah, sure.
Trade that has come. Steven Spielberg, the filmmaker, once said something very funny and interesting. He said the difference between pornography and erotica is the lighting. So, having said that, what I was referring to, if at all shocking, is not the nudity or the sex, but how it is presented outside an art film framework. In Gaspar Noé or a lot of art, quote unquote art cinema, you see kind of tastefully presented sex or nudity. Compared to this is like, completely homemade, raw 3x kind of video, which starts off this film, So if I was talking about shock only to that extent,
Yeah. But even pornography, like what is called the golden age of pornography during the 70s and all, they used to make really, well-produced, high-budget pornographic films were there,
Right.
I can't remember the names, but they were really good films with high production value and all. And even in Japan, you can see, the pink cinema is there, very, very popular and all that. Yeah, it's there. Okay. And I coming to the cinema, coming to the film, I didn't know that Romanian New Wave is a thing. I knew these individual directors and I have seen some of the films as well, but I didn't know that the Romanian New Wave is an established kind of movement. So that was interesting. And you were talking about the rage in the film, but I personally more resonated with the quirky kind of humor in the film, and it kind of reminded me of all the old films which came from the Eastern Bloc, you know, the Yugoslav Black Wave films, the Czech New Wave films. I was instantly kind of reminded of the films of, you know, Makeyev, the early
Makavejev,
films
yeah.
of, yeah,
Dusan
Makeyev,
Makavejev,
yeah, that mysteries of the organism.
Mysteries
Like,
of the organism, absolutely. It
yeah,
also
see, like
reminded
the
me of that.
chapter kind of division in the film also, you know, kind of blurring the line between documentary and cinema.
Fiction, yeah.
You know, playfully, you know, juggling the medium. You know, it reminded me of all those great directors. You know, Milos Forman's Fireman's Ball also. You know, the last kind of trial which is happening of this person, that reminded me of that, because it reminded me of these Soviet style committees, you know, inquiry commissions. There were a lot of those
Right,
happening
yes,
in
yes,
these
yes.
communist countries, right? A committee
Yes.
for this, committee for that, you know, the crazy bureaucracy. Yeah. And again, the second chapter, it was wonderful to see the kind of crazy montage. It reminded me of the montage from Alan Pakula's Parallax View, you know, the kind of that had a different idea that was for you know, how media is used as propaganda or something like that. Yeah, and I liked how we follow her around in the city, you know, when she goes from one place to another. And like you said, I like how the city is a very crowded, crazy place which has been completely taken over by big capital. It's very chaotic and wild. And it's in complete contrast with the images of Eastern Europe that we see in Western popular culture. You know, in Hollywood films and all, Eastern Europe is still associated with very kind of slow cities with Soviet style aesthetics kind of, you know, thing. So this was completely different from that. So that was interesting. Yeah, that is it. So this film basically reminded me of the Yugoslav Black Wave films, you know, rather than other Romanian New Wave films, to be honest. Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it did remind me of Dusan Makavejev, definitely. So I didn't, you know, talk about him. I wasn't sure, you know, because sometimes you know, as academics, we don't want to take the leap and, you know, connect films from different contexts, especially when you are presenting, doing a 20-minute or a half-an-hour presentation. But I did think about it. I wanted to share that with you. Yes, I think your insights were very nice. There's a lot of that quirky humor that you associated with Czech New Wave, the films of G.D. Menzel, for example, or Milos Forman, Loves of a Blonde, or, you know, Closely Guarded Friends, that quirky, that kind of humor. You see a little bit of that in Polish cinema also. The Polish cinema is largely a little dark. So yeah, there is a lot of this, you know, common legacy that you have in East Central Europe, as we call it now. And you know, when we talk about Romanian cinema, it didn't just come out of nowhere. You know, a lot of things that the new wave Romanian filmmakers were doing were new, but they, like all great film movements, it did have some genesis, some legacy, and that legacy ought to be films from the communist era. Thanks. I think you made a very strong point. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anyone else would like to respond now? Yes, Jayanto, you've unmuted yourself. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bhattacharya, for this wonderful film that you've shown us. I just wanted to ask you a question. I may be wrong, or I just want to throw this open for debate, that can we consider this film as a kind of a flaneur film, at least the middle part of it? And more importantly, how does it deviate from the from the norms of the flaneur film? We see this actor walking right across the city. We are with her. We see the city maybe not always through her eyes as it ought to have been in a flaneur film, because she's probably too traumatized by um, what has happened in her own life right now. So she is not really peeping into it. But then the fact is that we are going with her everywhere. So this interesting deviation from the norms of a flaneur film is something interesting to my mind, because all of us, who are familiar with what we call in India as the B-class cities, we have seen landscapes. We see landscapes like this day in, day out, where the old is struggling to remain, against the onslaught of new capital, big capital. So all that is something very familiar to us, But what is important is that we should have seen this through the eyes of this woman who is walking through all this huge landscape from one section to the other. She is not peeping into anyone's lives as the flaneurs ought to have done, for the simple
Yes,
reason
yes.
that is something which I found very interesting. And also, I will address the elephant in the room in the sense about whether what we can show and what we necessarily need not show, because I went through quite a few sort of reviews, critical reviews of the film, and I found that the vehemence with which the right of the filmmaker to show a scene like that middle class parents who are being sort of laughed at the end of the film, So there is this huge dichotomy between the aesthetics of the film and the politics of the film, which I think we need to look at, because I think it is easy enough to assume that the filmmaker himself kind of belongs to the class that he criticizes at the end of the film or throughout the film, or every middle class spectator by introducing a scene like that in the beginning, the very beginning, without any kind of an introduction, whereas I have seen some reviews where it says that it could have been very well suggested. It need not have been so graphic. I'm not either supporting this or the other. What I'm saying is that this whole huge disparity between the way people think about artistic freedom and censorship, something which needs to be examined a little more thoroughly. It need not be merely a political question. Of course, I can show whatever I want to show, because if you cannot, it's because of your middle class morality. By and large, 90% of the viewership of cinema from the beginning till now is middle class, So there has to be something um, which tells us, about this dichotomy between the politics of it and the art of it. We need to. I'm not sort of condemning anything. I'm not trying to justify anything. But what I'm saying is that it's too easy for someone like Radu Juda to begin a film like this, totally out of context, wherein it leads to a trauma where there could have been, because he is simply doing it because he thinks that it is his artistic freedom. Here in India, we have seen lots of comments that this is the only way in which artistic freedom can be maintained and can be come out with really true and honest films. So is that a considered artistic opinion, or is that a political opinion? That is my question, And this I really would want to know as to how it deviates, what are the reasons for him to deviate from what the flaneurs ought to have done, to create, I mean, going back to the the poetry of Baudelaire, or even, I mean, Virginia Woolf for that matter, as to, I mean, kind of letters that she has written, that I like to walk in the city. It is so much better than walking in the countryside. I walk through wretched neighborhoods. I look at the people. I peek into the, the public houses and see the life there. And that is what revives, quote unquote, my fire, She is doing exactly all that. She's walking through different sections of the city. The city itself is very familiar to us because we all live in such cities in India at this point of time, But yet, there is something momentous which has happened to her, which is essentially, we know, of a negative nature, the fact that it has been leaked and all that, and she's in for a whole lot of trouble, that she cannot participate in the life of the city as she ought to have been if she was not so traumatized at that point of time, which I thought was a very interesting thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. So, Indranil, you want to respond?
Yes, I think it's very fascinating. He brought up Flannery or Flanier. It's a very favorite subject of mine because I consider myself a Flanier. I do a lot of Flannery myself. I don't know if there is a genre of cinema which could be called Flanier cinema because, by ontologically, Flannery is not something you can frame so easily because in a way, I mean, the way the whole idea of Flannery has come from, Western culture, especially through Baudelaire, Charles Baudelaire, or through Virginia Woolf, which was mentioned, who were mentioned. I think Flannery is a kind of a sensory experience of the city. There is also this aspect that, a flaneur is not searching for anything. The flaneur is a disinterested walker who's interacting with the urbanscape in a very sensory way. I don't know if a woman who's feeling anxiety, who's trying to reach from point A to point B, can be exactly called a flaneur. But yes, I mean, the way it's, the city is represented, it does have some aspect of Flannery maybe, but I don't have an answer to that if it can be called a flaneur cinema, if at all. As the most loaded question, which I missed your name, sir. Can I have your name? I'm sorry.
Jayan Dasgupta. Jayan Dasgupta.
Mr. Dasgupta said, he described it as the elephant in the room. Well, I, as a, film scholar and a filmmaker myself, I would say that there are, a film can be made in X different ways or N different ways. And if a filmmaker, I mean, there are filmmakers who would have explored a similar subject, not showing any nudity at all. Somebody would have shown, nudity in a slightly more guarded way. And, you have Jude who's shows you very graphic sex and nudity. So I think I'll go by, as a filmmaker, I'll go by the political or the artistic right of the filmmaker to make a film as he wishes, wishes to do, rather than conform to any kind of, artistic morality or, social social morality or value. So this is what it is finally. I mean, any other filmmaker would have made it differently. I mean, sometimes when talking about censorship, it is argued that, look, Iranian cinema flourished not despite the censorship, or rather because of the censorship, that they couldn't show relationship between adults who are not related. So you hardly see any films about mature human relationship between the sexes. All you see are children or single women or single women, so but they're so fascinating. But at the same time, one cannot conjecture that if they had the artistic right like Western filmmakers have, whether they would have made more better films, less. It's like kind of a very open-ended question, which one cannot, it's in the realm of conjecture, frankly. I don't know if I kind of addressed your concern.
First,
You most, sorry, you most certainly had, because I just wanted to hear your thoughts on this here. Basically, I know that these questions simply cannot be answered right now without, without joining one side or the other. There cannot be a total objectivity of views. And the Flannery question once again, that this is a deviation. It is following the norms of a Flannery film, but the fact of the personal history and the dramatic nature of that, of the principal character, it takes away from her ability to be able to participate in what she's saying. So we do not see the city through her eyes as we ought to have been, but we know that these are the cities, and this is the toxic quality of life. And that old woman who comes out on the street for no reason shouts angrily at the camera. Could have been a documentary device, could have been a real, because there are people like that you encounter every day on the streets of an average, sized city in India. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, two people have raised their hand. Irina first, and then Tarakeshwar.
Thank you. That was such an interesting exchange. Thank you. I think that initial scene in the movie is very important to the movie as it is. Of course, there are, as you say, many different ways to make a movie. But first of all, I think the camera, the presence of the camera, contributes to the sex itself. In the dialogue between them, Eugen, the husband, says something about the camera, how it excites him. So I think that's important. And it's also important because this is so much part of the contemporary scene. As I understand it, I don't have children, so I'm a little bit removed from that whole scene. But for teenagers, this is often, I think, the first way that they encounter sex, and to not be able to deal with that sometimes pornographic world on the internet is really would I mean, this movie couldn't exist if it weren't for that issue. That's the issue that animates it. And yet at the same time, that initial sex scene is a very intimate one, and it's not really I don't know. I mean, at the same time that they're having sex, there is a knock on the door, and there is a conversation about yes, we're sleeping, and let her play. So they are talking about their own child, and it's a little bit uncomfortable. It's kind of common packed apartment in Bucharest, and so it's ordinary as well as whatever erotic in a 21st century way that couldn't quite be the same without the camera. The camera has its role there, and then it ends up on whatever it is, Pornhub or something
Pornhub,
like
yeah.
that, because he takes the computer to be fixed, I think, or we don't know exactly how that happens, but so I think that that scene does grab the viewer. It's and then it ends up, of course, in part 3 as being you know, the object of that meeting, but also a titillating device, right? They insist on replaying that scene where they wouldn't have had to do that. So it's a very important scene, both in a couple of different ways, it seems to me. And as far as the flaneur in the movie, you know, typically the classic flaneur is male in the 19th century French or origins. But of course, this is a 21st century flaneur in Bucharest. And I do think we see the city through her eyes, and it's not a very pretty picture, but it has its moments. I mean, she steps into that old bookstore or antiquarian bookstore, and she has kind of a nice exchange with this guy who tells her about another book, and he can't help breaking out into laughter behind his mask. And you know that she buys a book, I think, and then she goes into a passage where she has a coffee, and that's kind of a very nice old bourgeois setting that has been recuperated. And then there are other scenes which are much less pleasant, but I do think that you see the city through her eyes, very anxious, but nevertheless, it is through her eyes. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
Thank you, Irina. Tarakeshwar?
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for placing the film in the context of Romanian New Wave and also other New Waves, because I lack that kind of knowledge about the movies. So now the discussion is revolving around the filmic text itself. So there are 2 issues that are emanating here. One is about the structure of this movie. Though the movie claims that there are 3 parts, actually there are 4 parts, including the much discussed the pornographic part in the beginning. So, and then the second part where we look at and the third part, which is a collage, and the 4th part where there is a discussion. I think it's very interesting the way first we watch the this shocking, quote unquote shocking, because it may not be shocking for many of us, that's a different issue. Scene, shocking not because of its pornographic content, because we wouldn't expect a movie to begin with that. So as we were discussing, we are accustomed to erotic scenes as part of the narrative. So this doesn't come as part of the narrative. It comes as a kind of separate entity. And when the second part begins, we are unable to connect the 2 until the phone calls and then she talking about taking it off. And we are unable to identify this character who is roaming around the city is the one who is in the that clip. So in that sense, that is not clear to us unless some dialogues happen. And she is not traumatized. She doesn't come across to me as a traumatized. Yes, she is loitering, but it all seems to be with a purpose. She is going to the bookshop, exchanging the book. She is going to a medical shop. She is buying something, and then she is going to meet the headmistress, and she has coffee to have that medicine. So everything is a purpose. So she is not simply loitering and then looking around the city. It is actually we are looking at her and we are following her, and it is not about our trauma. Uh, that is quite interesting, I thought. Nothing has happened. She doesn't come across as somebody who is part of a pornographic clip, except for the dialogues. If you start observing her, she is like any other ordinary woman who is walking around the city and doing her daily course. So, in that sense, it is not at all shocking to us. And then the third part, again, is quite interesting in the sense that it appears as a kind of footnote or a kind of glossary for the discussion that is going to come in the fourth part. So generally the glossary should come at the end, our footnote should be at the end or the end note. But to understand the discussion, we are given certain things in the third part. So in terms of a kind of collage. So what is nationalism, fascism, many other issues as anthropology, colonialism, everything comes there. So it's a kind of glossary to enter the discussion or to frame the discussion. So in that sense, this fourth part is quite interesting. It is actually talking about the what we call as pornography. That is the issue. It is not the trauma of your private moments unwittingly going on the net. That is not the issue at all. So the private and the public itself is collapsing. As Irina was saying, the camera, when you place the camera and you want the camera to witness what you are doing, so-called private, and you want to watch it again as a kind of third person, or you want someone else to watch you are doing and then you get kick out of it. This kind of private public dichotomy that we created in the discourse of sexuality, that itself is under erasure now. I think nothing has happened to the city. City is not bothered about what this woman is doing, what has happened to this woman. The city is on its own. It is more worried about COVID. It is more worried about a lot of other things that is happening there. It is more worried about the exchange that is happening there. So in that sense, and she is also this is an interesting character. This is teacher. She is not worried at all. Yes, she is worried it has to be taken up, but it again goes up. She thinks about taking it off, but we don't see kind of too much worry on her face. And she meets the headmistress. She speaks openly to her. Yes, we filmed it, but we don't know how it went on the web. But not crying, not trying to request something, a kind of favor. As a kind of matter of fact, she's saying it, and she comes back. And in the meeting also, yes, she's being attacked, but she defends valiantly. It is not that she's being the target of others. In fact, she is attacking the others. And even the three solutions that are given, even there she doesn't come out as a kind of victim. Nowhere she presents herself as a victim. So in that sense, the discourse of my private moments going on the web and being worried about it, the private becoming the public, and then what will, I am a teacher, what my students will think. She is not actually worried about these students, and she says it in so openly. She is more worried about the parents. That is also very clear there. So in that sense, she never comes out as a kind of victim. So in that sense, the film is not about the trauma that the first part creates on the victim or on the character. So in that sense, it's quite interesting where this question of public, private, this question of victim, this question of trauma is completely takes on a new meaning in this narrative. If at all we can call it as a narrative. But the structure of these 4 parts, that's how it looks like a kind of comment on this collapsing of these two boundaries between private and public with camera. See what is happening now. See, the discussion of film should also happen in the public. Now we are sitting in our private spaces, but we are having a public discussion. So this camera, this internet, has quietly broken down the private public dichotomy that existed in terms of space. Now my private moments are public and the public is in my private domain. So this kind of internet and the camera, this is what is digital world is creating. I think that is a comment, this film is a comment on that. So trying to frame this issue in terms of private, public, in terms of trauma, victim, I think is a kind of pass. I think that's the message that I got out of the film. Thank you.
Thank you. Indranil, you want to respond?
Yeah, just a brief thank you, Tarakeshwar, for the long, comments, very interesting insights. I would differ a little bit on a couple of points, in the sense that, the whole idea of a triptych, it kind of, it sits better when you're framing this film. And I think the beginning sex video is more of a prelude, or the beginning equivalent of what we call coda. The coda comes in the end, so it is like, a beginning, a prelude, whereas the main body of the film is like a triptych, which is a kind of reading that I got, and I think is more kind of, sits with the framework that I was doing. And as far as this whole anger spilling in the city, I think this film becomes a film of a different kind because it is set in the backdrop of the pandemic. And that is why the anger that spills out, that you encounter, that Emilia encounters in the cities, which kind of, perplexes her, and the anger of the parents, the director is saying these angers are somehow related. It's a zeitgeist, it's the spirit of the times that he's talking about, which is of anger, rage, and somewhere this rage and this distrust that the conspiracy theories that, the COVID actually was created in a lab. It's like a, a Zionist, Jewish conspiracy, or this kind of conspiracy, or that's conspiracy. We are living in a world which is full of this kind of theories and this kind of anger, and the anger about, the angry exchange that we witness, the one in the departmental store where this lady is buying, using food stamps to buy, and then there are someone queuing up who gets very impatient because her time, her patience is tasted. I myself had actually experienced very similar things when I was out shopping during the pandemic, and it really resonated with me, that kind of anger and impatience about your fellow citizens. And it seemed like, a kind of a zombie apocalypse to me, to see that, people are so angry all the time. So I think, there is a link between that anger and the anger that you witness in the final scene. To that extent, I'll differ with you. And also this whole issue of public private, of course, it is a very central issue of what is public and what is private. As far as Emilia is concerned, the idea is not whether Emilia thinks of herself as a victim, but the fact that a very unfair attack is unleashed on her. She is called names, she's called a slut, her sex life is kind of dissected in public, and all kinds of things said to her. And this is, in a kind, it's a sexual harassment that she's experiencing. So whether we like it or not, she is kind of, it's a rape. I would call it a rape that is actually inflicted on her. So whether she considers herself a victim or not is immaterial in a certain context, because she may be, mounting a defense, strong defense, but the fact that, these men are raping her with the words, so that is the anger that the director had felt about Emilia's predicament, and the anger that resonated with me as a viewer and somebody who read the film. So So that is what I thought I would just, as my concluding comment, I would add.
Rajan, please go ahead. Rajan has raised his hand. Rajan, please go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, I would like to comment on the first scene and the music of it, because
Sure.
the song that's played is Lily Marleen, which is an interesting in itself, because it was written down as a poem perhaps by a first World War Jewish person, and in the Second World War it's taken up and it's sung, and it cannot be contained because Radio Belgrade is the first to broadcast it, right? And then it goes all around the world and it hits all the soldiers who are in the Second World War, and it has such a lot of political content, right? So that's something that at one moment it's a very attractive song, and then at the same time you see all this very open pornography visually, right? Yeah, so I think that's something that I think has to be thought about, because the music keeps changing, right? So yeah, and the idea is, how do you contain media? Once it goes out of hand, you can't, whether it's a song like Lily Marleen or a sex video or a private video or any kind of thing today, we can't control it, right? So I think that's interesting. But at the end of it all, this whole idea of online, offline, right? When the fight takes place, or the judgment of Emilia takes place, right? It's offline, right? And it's in the pandemic, so these offline meetings are actually looked forward to, right? You have to actually go and meet people. That's a kind of a luxury, right? So I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, Indranil, you want to respond?
No, I'm not. I don't have. It's a very nice observation. I didn't know about the Lily Marleen. I knew about the song, but I've forgotten. And thank you for Rajan for reminding me of the Lily Marleen song. It's been a long time.
Okay, anyone else? Anyone else would like to respond? Yeah, Sanjay, please go ahead.
Yeah, actually, since Jayan Dasgupta he started a discussion on Flannery. That was I started thinking in a different direction from what I had already thought of the film. Well, I would say that I am not aware of this kind of film, whether there is Flannery film or Flanner kind of film, but what I see here is that I don't think she can be considered as Flanners in the sense, but there is, of course, also a concept of Flanners in the sense of female. A Flanner, that concept existed in 19th century, of course, in the writings of Walter Benjamin on Baudelaire, and Baudelaire himself talks about that because he was basically influenced by Edgar Allan Poe, the American writer he translated, and particularly a short story of Edgar Allan Poe, which is The Man of the Crowd.
Yeah.
So on which Baudelaire also wrote a poem. It is exactly based on the same story. And by 20th century, we come to the story, actually it's an essay by Virginia Woolf, which is Street Haunting, I think. So in this, Virginia Woolf, as Dasgupta had already talked about it, that she comes out of her house and she just roams around, and it's like around 25-page essay, and then she comes back. So there is nothing significant, like a particular purpose for which she has gone out. I think it's mentioned somewhere about buying a pencil, but that's not so important. So I would say that the lady here, Emmy, is not Flanners, though the concept of Flanners also exists in the sense of female, just as Flanner exists, because there is a latest book in 2016 published by Lauren Elkin, And the title of the book is Flanners. So the concept exists, but I don't see the lady, the protagonist, as Flanners. It is basically the camera which is doing the job of Flannery. So if you like, camera, as it is feminine, la camera, so we can say that it is camera which is Flanners rather than the protagonist who is doing that, because sometimes camera moves away from the protagonist, I mean several times, and just focuses here and there on some billboards on the street, on the cars and other women also. So that was a fascinating part of discussion. And besides that, the ending is also interesting because it gives you the option of different ways in which the film can end. So that points out the self-reflexivity of the film, because it shows us the constructedness of the story. As sometimes that lady in the market, the old lady, she comes and she uses abusive words that also disrupts the flow of the narrative. So in a way, like, she talks directly to the audience through the camera. So these 2 points I found interesting. And of course, thank you very much for giving a good background about the film. And it was very informative, and I liked the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sanjay Kumar. Indranil, would you like to respond?
Yes, I think, it's a very interesting observation in this. Mr. Sanjay Kumar gave a background about the concept of Flannery and its roots in Western literature and in the writings of Edgar Allan Poe and Virginia Woolf and Walter Benjamin and of course Baudelaire. In fact, at some point, I think I was saying the same thing in the sense that, the fact that Emilia moves from point A to point B with a purpose doesn't technically make her a flaneur in the strict sense of the term, but there are, elements of flannery in the sense that, the sensory aspect of the city comes alive. And the important point that Mr. Sanjay Kumar makes is the fact that the camera becoming a flaneur. I think it's a very interesting point because if you remember in my presentation, I also said that, the camera here moves between people and things as if they're of equal weight. It does not always hierarchize humans. It's not like an anthropocentric camera. That is why the camera moves between people and things, sometimes giving us the feeling that the city has a presence, the buildings, the architecture, the streets have a life of their own, have a sense of their own, a presence of their own. I didn't want to invoke Gilles Deleuze, but it's in a way I was reminded of the time image. The way Gilles Deleuze frames the concept of time image. Where the kind of narrative stops, and as if the temporality takes us into a completely different domain. There is a severing of the linkage, between the flow of the narrative and the time, and we experience time in its pure form, or duration, as Deleuze calls it. I had that feeling. I didn't want to, because getting into Deleuze is a very, very loaded thing. Sometimes it takes away the discussion into other important parts. I like Deleuze, but I also sometimes is very aware of the fact that when you invoke Deleuze, it kind of takes away the discussion in a completely different direction. So yes, I think Mr. Sanjay Kumar's observations were very interesting. He reminded me of of Deleuze and the way I thought of Deleuze when watching the film.
Thank you. Anyone else who has anything to say about the film? Yes, Tarakeshwar, go ahead. You unmuted yourself.
Even the last section, the discussion, it's more about pedagogy and whether sexuality should be part of pedagogy or not. And then the quoting of scholars about it, what is pedagogy, what should be taught, how it should be taught. I think it's more about that than about whether we should sack her or not. Of course, it is also there, but I think it's more dominated by the discussion. Somehow, she actually veers it towards that uh, rather than towards uh, uh, talking about what kind of trauma she is undergoing. So I think the issue of pedagogy and sexuality also come out strongly in the discussion at the end of the film. And the third solution is actually she attacking those people. So in that sense, it's quite interesting uh, take on the issue.
Hello.
Yeah.
I think Tarakeshwar got muted. Huh?
No, I think he finished. Did you, Tarakeshwar, did you finish?
Yeah. I just wanted to make that pedagogy point.
Yeah, very right. Because there's a lot of theoretical discussion about pedagogy, about sexuality, whether, because we assume that children are repulsed, their innocence is corrupted by watching sex or nudity, whereas research, empirical evidence doesn't really say so. There's a lot of theorization, and in the end, that is why we have a very long list of theorists. So Jude as a filmmaker is he's very discursive, and he doesn't shy about referring to philosophers or thinkers or schools of thought. So yes, I think Tarakeshwar was very right about the third scene being very pedagogical and very theoretical in essence.
Irina, you've unmuted. Please go ahead.
I just wanted to thank you so much for letting me attend. It was fascinating, and I learned a lot from various people. And if I have a chance, I might let Radu Jude know that his film is being discussed by Indian film scholars.
That will be lovely. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much.
All right.
For me, he's the rock star of filmmaking.
Yeah, he is. And he's, I just think he's a very good person, very ethical, and he likes to take on the big issues, not just
Yes.
sort of in society. And I admire him.
Yes. We like him too. Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you for lovely insights. It's great having you in this discussion. It really, added to the quality of discussion with your interventions. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
If there are no more responses, Sanjay,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
Yeah.
Unmuted
Thank you. Just one small point, because Professor Tarakeshwar raised this issue of pedagogy. That short story is mentioned, that short story of Isaac Babel, Salt. And she has been asked to justify that. Why did she teach that story? Like, this kind of discussion has already been going on around us, that what teachers should teach in the classroom and what they should not. Okay, so that story is very interesting because Isaac Babel, he was a supporter of Bolshevik revolution, and he was a Jew, and he had seen the persecution of Jews in the Tsarist regime, and since the Bolshevik revolution was against that kind of persecution and supportive of Jews, so he was also in favor of the revolution, but slowly, he was also critical of here and there in his observations of the communist regime. And by, I think, 1940 around, which he was executed by Stalin. So in the story, what happens is something which is a kind of reflection of what is happening in the film. That the protagonist he presents himself as someone who is liberal and who respects women, and there is a woman who is trying to go with the soldiers, Kazakhs, in the van, and then he invites her to join the crowd because she wants to see her husband, which is not true. Actually, she has been carrying salt and something, and then which is not a baby. She says that she has a baby with her, and it is actually salt. Then she has been exposed, and then the protagonist who claims to be very, liberal and progressive or whatever, respectful of women and all that. Finally, he is the one who throws the woman out of the van, and he kills her. So that kind of contradiction is shown, and the kind of contradiction which was also reflected in the life of Isaac Babel, which is there in the short story, which is also like, the Stalin, he was executed by the orders of Stalin. And what is happening here in the film also, you see that, that there are so many among the parents, there are many of them who are like, anti-Semitic and anti-Roma, there is kind of Roma phobia also in the film. So that in that sense, I liked really, that the pedagogy part that being discussed by the parents, hypocritical parents who beat up their children, as it is said in the second part, or that 6 out of 10 children, they are subject to family violence, as it was already discussed today. So, and the same parents, they are protesting, they are saying that you are spoiling our children. Okay, but she has, as a teacher, as a history teacher, right to teach such texts. That is what she believes, and she justifies that. But these people, they are asking her to justify why does she teach this text in the class, and that's what is interesting. Thanks for raising that issue, Tarkeswar sir. Okay.
Okay. Any other comments? Indranil, anything you want to say?
No, I think a lot has been said, and it was quite a rich and fascinating discussion. We can, I think, now close the session.
Yeah. So thank you all. Thank you, Indranil, first of all, for suggesting the film and also giving us such a good background to the film, which helped us to, maybe we can revisit the film in the light of all that has been said today. Thanks, Irina, for joining the discussion and giving us so many details. We watched with fascination Indranil and your exchange, and it helped fill so many holes in our own understanding. Thanks to everyone for joining the discussion today, and we hope to see you all next Saturday at 9 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Indranil.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Especially Nikhila and
Thank you.
Geeta.
Bye bye.
Bye. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.